Hi, welcome to the Pursuit of Truth. So I've got a bit of a swollen knee at the moment, which I think may be septic arthritis. So I'm taking antibiotics for that. I'm much better. But I did see this while I wasn't well, but I didn't have energy to record this Pursuit of the Truth. So this is about Israel, Gaza. Like I say, it's not to do with them per se. You know, let's look at this as a historic piece. Let's look at this in the human context. Take away the tags that we put on ourselves that are man-made, all human beings. This is about illustrating the system that we live within, which we all seem to agree is the best system that we all should live, with money and with dividing ourselves up, and you know, the 21st century, 20th century system created by people 1,000 years ago who were probably racist, bigots, all sorts of things, you know, prideful, possessive, and just wanted to dominate people and didn't care about the individuals. And yet we're still keeping their system alive. This is an example of what happens with that, what we do to each other.
Good. This child is only a few days old and fighting for her life. The bones of her exposed ribcage heave up and down as each small breath takes great effort. She barely has the strength to keep living. Look at how the nappy dwarfs her skeletal body. Her mother is so malnourished herself that she cannot breastfeed, and so her baby is dying because she cannot get the nutrition that newborns so desperately need.
Within 2 weeks, we detected more than 450 patients of malnutrition. This were all detected in our hospitals, which means that this number of most likely increase in the coming days.
Amjad is 3 years old, but weighs only 5 kilos. His mother stays by his bed all day, helpless to do very much but cuddle her son. Amjad has now left Gaza for emergency treatment with a few other desperately ill children. They were driven across the border into Israel and then Egypt. There is hope that they will survive. That evacuation came too late for this baby. She was born 2 months premature because her mother was so exhausted. And then she starved to death in the only home that she knew, a hospital incubator. Her parents didn't get a chance to name her. Even wrapped in a green shroud, you can sense how tiny her body is inside.
All around are babies here waiting to die, one by one, like my daughter. There is no medicine, no dietary supplements, no treatment whatsoever. We cannot live.
The Rafah border crossing with Egypt remains closed because the IDF continues to occupy and operate in the land around it. The US military pier that has been so ineffective so far has restarted operations again, but a lot of the aid isn't being distributed because of security concerns. Under international pressure, Israel has released images of aid stacked up on the Gaza side of the Kerem Shalom crossing, claiming that the aid is getting in, but blaming the UN for not collecting it. The UN, though, has said that it is often too dangerous to distribute aid and that the organization is close to suspending its operations. Much of Gaza is now just a network of streets and alleys, lined by high mounds of rubble and the shells of homes and shops. Fuel is scarce, so donkey and cart is the best way to get around, if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's on foot. In northern Gaza, children queue with their pans or plastic buckets, patiently waiting for the daily handout of food. It is well into the summer here now. Temperatures are regularly into the mid or high 30s. Today's meal is plain rice. A couple of scoops will have to feed the whole family. Some of the children thrust their bowls to the front, desperate not to miss out. When it's almost all gone, they scrape what they can from the bottom. Nothing can go to waste. Old or young, war has little respect for age, and it is always, always the most vulnerable who suffer the most. Alistair Bunker, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Difficult scenes coming out of Gaza there. Well, let's get more of a sense of what's happening on the ground and how difficult that job is to get aid into Gaza. With me now is the Director of Planning for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, Sam Rose. Thank you very much, Sam, for joining us here on the program. It's difficult to see those images that we've continued to see progressively over the last 9 months as this war has continued.
Absolutely. I mean, it's deeply, deeply upsetting, deeply troubling to see those images. And these are stories that we're hearing from people around Gaza over the past eight months. Those children we saw in the incubators, some of whom sadly died, are products of the war. Their parents have been pregnant throughout the war, and their lives are just utter misery. The parents will have been displaced multiple times. They'll have lost their homes, they'll have likely lost all their belongings, lost many family members, and dealing with pregnancy, dealing with young children, and constantly being shunted from one part of Gaza to another in utter misery.
Yeah, and that is also part of, the issue around malnutrition, being displaced from one place to another over and over again. Is causing them to not be able to have any form of stability. I mean, what was, striking in that report, and something that you see when you travel to anywhere where people are suffering from this level of famine, is that parents, it's usually the parents who are suffering from malnutrition as well. It's just less visible than it is with the children.
Yeah, it's less visible, and I guess it has less lifelong impacts. I mean, children who suffer from malnutrition in the first 2 years of their lives, and also have had mothers who have been malnourished whilst they've been gestating, they're at real risk of lifelong physical and developmental issues in terms of cognitive abilities, in terms of physical abilities. And we focus so much during this conflict on aid and trucks getting in, which on one level is very dehumanizing, but it also misses the point in terms of what we need to do to get on top of the catastrophic food insecurity situation that's being faced in Gaza right now. Yes, people need the basics. They need calories, but they also need water. They need healthcare. They need infrastructure. They need toilets. And they need to avoid the trauma that destroys them mentally and destroys their immune systems. And indeed, we've lots and lots of stories from our health clinics of children being treated for malnutrition and then just go right back out into exactly the same conditions, and then they relapse, or else even worse, they're not able to complete the treatment because they're displaced again. And over the past week alone, 1 in 6 people in Gaza have received evacuation orders. So the level of and the scale of this is just immense.
Yeah, it's devastating. The other thing is that Israel has continued to say, and I've spoken to Israeli officials on this program, that the aid they're allowing to get in, but they're pointing the finger at the UN for not getting their act together fast enough to be able to distribute it.
Yeah, I mean, look, this antagonistic, this confrontational relationship being played out on social media is deeply unhelpful and does a disservice to the humanity of people in Gaza who are living under the most atrocious conditions. It remains extremely difficult to get supplies into Gaza. It always has done. It was, even before the 7th of October, everything that came into Gaza was strictly monitored and subject to very stringent procedures. Those procedures have intensified, but as a result of the conflict, which is now entering it, coming on for 9 months, that going on for that long, we're seeing breakdowns in law and order inside Gaza, things starting to fall apart. So as well as problems at the crossing, there are also problems with our staff being able to get from that crossing. I mean, just this evening, truck drivers have been arrested on their way back from the crossing, and that's blocked the entire crossing for anything else going in and going out. So we've got some of our staff trapped down there tonight. Just doing anything in the environment in Gaza now is incredibly difficult. Truck drivers going down there are passing through conflict zones, active fighting zones, very difficult, very dangerous environments that we're having to work in.
Yeah, and as you say, the fabric of society starts to fray in these situations, and so does law and order. Just briefly, if you can, you're in Gaza now, you've got teams there at the moment where entering 9 months into this conflict, just give us a sense of the situation there now with the actual fighting.
Yeah, there's bombardments going on all the time, all around me. I'm in central Gaza and we hear it all day and we hear it all night. But just in the past week, we've had new operations starting in Gaza City, 85,000 people displaced over a very short period of time. And then 2 days ago, evacuation orders issued for 250,000 people in Khan Yunis and in Rafah. So the conflict just appears to go on and on and on, and every day is worse than the previous day, and every tomorrow is worse than today. People are shattered, they're exhausted, they've just had enough. They feel abandoned, they feel humiliated, they feel helpless, and that they've got no element of control whatsoever over any aspects of their lives anymore. It's simply tragic.
It is. Sam, we're really grateful that you're able to join us at this hour on the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And there you go. It's this is the world we live in. This is the humanity we have for each other. And it is easy, like when there's a different situation, like say Ukraine, Russia, the same sides will then take different sides and say, well, look how bad this is, what Russia's doing. Like today, Russia, there was hypersonic missiles attacks in Kyiv. I think one hit or next to or hit a children's hospital. The collateral damage, the human aspect of war, and that's why war should never be waged, is that those civilians that are always going to get endangered. But it's easy for the West to or someone to look at this and say, well, look at how bad Putin and Russia's being, and look at the poor Ukrainians, but maybe on a different side, a different situation. The fact is, it doesn't matter the sides, it doesn't matter the names. They're all human beings with different methodologies and ideologies and cultures and etc. Yet we're all human beings. The problem is war. War is wrong. War is horrible. War is not John Wayne and John Mills and whoever, Brad Pitt, Tom Hanks, this great thing that we should celebrate. Yes, we fought. Yeah. Like Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, to simplify it. But yeah, I know good versus evil is great and everything. But in reality, it's human suffering is what it really is. Yes, okay, sometimes we have to fight to save, I don't know whether we do or not, but because most of it's politics and most of it's these big men at the top that don't ever take part in the fights and have problems with each other, and they want to control bits of land, and they want this, that and the other, and they want power and greed and politics and all that, and they get us little people to, because we've been brainwashed into these little boxes, to fight their wars for them, no matter what. Some may have more justification than others, but war is always going to be suffering for the majority of individuals, usually not those individuals that start the wars, usually not those individuals, unless you go into the Nuremberg trials or something, but usually not those individuals that are fighting either side are not the ones that are suffering. The people who always suffer, the victims of war of either side, are the civilians, are the human beings. Humanity is the suffering of wars. And look, this is what we're doing to each other in the 21st century. And it doesn't matter whether there's a reason for it or not. It doesn't matter which side or whatever. We're all human beings. But this is part of the system we live in, because part of the system we live in is dividing each other up And that's what allows us to fight each other, because we forget that we're all human beings. We're brothers and sisters of each other. What we see is, well, you're not like me. You're this, I'm that. And so if you have a problem, if you want that bit of land, well, then, no, that's mine. Because thousands of years ago, my ingrate people, those degenerates thousands of years ago, sorry to use that word, but the thousands of years ago people who were probably almost certainly racists, almost certainly, had no compassion for the majority of human beings that live now, the colour of human beings. And I don't mean that in colour of skin, I mean that colour of humanity, the differences of each of us that we tolerate, or that we understand. Not tolerate is the wrong word. We understand this is how we all choose to live. They would not have, we know the things that happened thousands of years. The people that divided us all up used to burn people, used to do the worst things. You look at, you think war crimes now, look thousands of years ago what they used to do to each other. Putting each other in cages with spikes, the putting the nails through the fingers and all sorts of things. There was no war crimes there. There was no amnesty. There was no, Geneva Convention, all that kind of stuff. The things they used to do to each other thousands of years ago, and yet they're the ones who divided us all up. There's the ones that came up with the ideas of schools and government and all that kind of stuff. Democracy, the Romans, the Greeks. Look how all the things they got up to. They're our forefathers, all of us, because we all, no matter our cultures and etc., we all live in their imprint, in the ideology of that this is a bit of land and this is yours, and you have to elect these people to take control of you, and you must have banks, you must have schools, you must have hospitals. Every single, it's a template for every single country. Look at every single country. India, China, America, Russia, UK, Saudi, whoever you look at, each country will, like Iran or America, won't like each other, or there's lots of countries that don't like each other. There's lots of countries that band together. But take all that away. Look at the template of each of them. They all have the same infrastructure. They all have the same society, and that all came from people thousands of years ago. That if the people who came across that divided us all stood in front of us now, would we let them change anything? And yet we're still following that system because it's gone from system to system. We kept putting band-aids and thinking, well, this is it. This is the best. That's really what we're living in. Some person's 1,000-year-old system that probably wouldn't even tolerate you. And we're still voting that system in, thinking, well, that's the best system we can come up with because they came up with it, dividing us all up. And yeah, maybe it wasn't one particular person and it's happened over time and etc. But when's going to be the point where, like I had the point of like stopping and thinking, wait a minute, let's look back and let's see where all this came from. And wait a minute, we're free to do whatever we like. Why are we shackling ourselves like this? When will be the time that everyone else looks at themselves and all those worldly, maybe they already know. But of course, they're all right, Jack, isn't it? So it's probably never going to happen. Anyway, sorry for my rant at the end. Take care, take it easy, God bless, and peace.